Well, welcome back to Notre Dame. I'm Christine Karsten. Joining me now, Patrick Regan. You lead the Notre Dame Global Adaptation Index, or ND-GAIN, which evaluates the preparedness of each country around the world for handling challenges like climate disruption. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. How is climate change really affecting this world right now?
Well, I think climate change is happening, and we have to deal with that. From our point of view, the climate is imposing consequences on the planet in ways largely that affect the human population. And even though we can't, in the short term, address the factors that drive climate change, mitigation, we can, in the short term, address questions of adaptation to minimize those consequences.
Well, I'm happy that you brought up adaptation. Why is that so important?
Well, adaptation is really the human response to the physical drivers of the climate. So if the sea levels rise and they inundate coastal areas, say Bangladesh, the local population living in the coastal area is going to be harmed by the climate. We need to think of strategies to deal with that.
Certainly makes sense. Well, let's talk a little bit about ND-GAIN. What is that?
ND-GAIN is an initiative on campus to help some stakeholders. It could be the private sector, it could be governments, the United Nations, and scholarship, to think about best practices for adaptation, to think about how understanding adaptation informs our knowledge of outcomes. An example might be the spread of the Zika virus today. That climate, many people think, is driving the Zika virus, and we have human methods for adapting to the spread of the virus that will affect human populations.
So really, ND-GAIN is kind of helping solve these problems a little bit. It's certainly unique here, if you will.
It's unique here, but I think it's also more unique in a global setting, and certainly in an American setting, that we have a dedicated team of people who is at least thinking about how to address these things.
Yeah.
And it's in many ways at the cutting edge of thinking about how to address them. So we have a great opportunity on this campus.
I think when it comes to climate change, a lot of people say, how can I help? So how can the public really help with this, or is there a way that they can really do that?
Well, if you think,
You're like, the list is long.
Yeah, the list is long. So if you think of it from a mitigation point of view, the individual can reduce CO2 emissions, driving different cars, walking, whatever.
Certainly.
From an adaptation point of view, I think it helps to think of ways that you could respond adequately. It's more of a big institution rather than a small individual.
Makes sense. Certainly a huge topic we could spend hours talking about, right?
Indeed, yes.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for hanging out with us and giving us some insight on all this.
Good, thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, my
All
pleasure.
Right.